3/4 of the population of the Earth live in what we sometimes call the Third World, the less developed nations, where 80% of the people live in poverty. They are heading for their cities. They come in hopes of a better life. They hope to create an industrial society and gain a fair share of 20th century prosperity. The flow to the cities is not easing up. It is estimated that by the year 2000, there will be 20 cities in the Third World with more than 10 million inhabitants. And so, paradoxically, the poorest nations in the world face the greatest pressure to create urban services which have never before existed. One of the prime necessities of the good urban life is mobility. Otherwise, the huge new cities will contain nothing but stagnant pockets of human misery. They called it the Lunatic Express, built by the British at the turn of the century to open up East Africa. Among other things, it created Nairobi. Nairobi began as a collection of tents by the railroad tracks. Today it is a modern city with 600,000 inhabitants, and that number is growing daily. Since independence in 1963, the people have forsaken the plains and the coffee hills and have poured into their capital city, where the good life was supposed to be waiting. Many thousands came without money, jobs, or industrial skills. They had to settle far from the center of town, where the land was cheap. By 1986, 40% of Nairobi's population was living in illegal housing areas. There is very little in the way of services or sanitation facilities. 16,000 people are crammed into each square kilometer. There are no telephones to call an ambulance or a fire truck, and even if there were, the streets are far too narrow for any motor vehicle. There's a little cottage industry serving local needs, but most people are out of work. They are far from the city proper. They are far from the large industrial areas, where a few days' work a month at a decent wage could dramatically improve the quality of their life. 75% of Nairobi doesn't even own a bicycle. There are not enough buses, and even if there were, the vast majority could not afford them. A bus ticket a day would eat up 30% of their income. For thousands, there is a 2-hour walk to the nearest center of employment, and then they wait. On those days when there is no work, they walk home with their pockets empty. The gleaming towers of downtown Nairobi can become as unreachable as the streets of New York. The Kenya bus service was created by the British 50 years ago. It was built to serve a small white middle-class population, and as is the case in much of the Third World, the government cannot afford to subsidize it. To make money, the bus company cannot afford to increase its fleet or lower its fares. It is therefore of little use to the huge outlying population living at the poverty level. As the city grew, a new and distinctive service appeared on the streets of Nairobi. The matatu was officially defined as any motor vehicle which carries passengers for hire or reward, but which is not licensed to do so. Before long, the matatus were carrying almost half of the city's passengers. They were owned and maintained by individual operators. The fare collectors and the drivers came from the ranks of the poor, and so they provided not only transport, but employment for the poor. The fares were low, and to make any money, they had to be jam-packed. The fare collector not only sells tickets, at every stop he hits the streets and drums up business. Their routes are flexible, adjustable on a moment's notice to meet the needs of the passengers. Not only were the matatus overloaded, they sometimes had no brakes. Since they operated outside the law, the only safety standards depended on the individual operator's cash flow. The average operator paid out 2% of his income in fines, and another 6% in what they called transfer payments, a polite euphemism for a bribe. In 1984, the government finally decided that the matatu had to be legitimized.
Matatus had become so lousy, they had become so many, so uncontrollable, that it was necessary for government to look and see what could be done to make the industry more orderly.
It is the legislation which came into effect in 1984 that identified matatus as passenger-carrying, fare-charging vehicles.
They are now required to have a mandatory inspection, and therefore all the road unworthy vehicles are eliminated.
And so they face the dilemma of the developing countries. It has been argued that regulations can become so strict that they knock out the very people they're trying to help. To maintain the standards, the individual operator will either go broke or have to raise his fares beyond the reach of his passengers. No one can argue against basic safety, but nitpicking regulations concocted by bureaucrats sometimes have more to do with comfort and appearance. The matatus have always been constructed in Nairobi, scavenging old parts and gluing them together. Now it's more formal, but the matatus are still built right in Nairobi. At Choda Motors, however, business is not so good.
Why is business so slack?
It's the insurance premiums which have risen tremendously. They've gone about threefolds, and it's becoming very difficult for people to afford the premium.
Because of the high insurance premiums and the new design standards, the cost of a new matatu is now far beyond the reach of the individual owner. Sharp businessmen are buying fleets of 10 or 12 matatus. They have access to funding and the capital to speculate on long-term transportation needs. But in some parts of the third world, size may be the only solution. Bombay, India, at 3 o'clock in the morning. 2,300 buses are clean and ready. Each one will carry almost 2,000 passengers before this day is done. A highly industrialized city with 8 million people, and half of them will be taking the bus. They live in a city built by the British Raj in the style of Victorian England, and Victorian England didn't know about the automobile. There is a growing middle class driving cars. If that trend continues, the city could be paralyzed. The more people they can get on the bus, the better. And the efficiency of that bus system is a cardinal factor in the quality of life in Bombay. There are 17,000 drivers and conductors. There's a consistent system of discipline. There's a financial bonus for efficiency, but the conductor who pockets a fare is usually fired. A semi-autonomous public system with a high degree of independence, and if it didn't work, Bombay would be in chaos. One of the reasons it works is this training school. They come in at age 14 and study for 3 years. This is not just basic training. The fuel injector is vital to the economy of the fleet. It requires tricky adjusting, and the trainees must master it. They are carefully selected, and 98% of them pass. The school also trains technicians for other cities in India and other developing countries. The emphasis everywhere is on preventive maintenance. Parts have been standardized. Where there was once 120 different types of windows, there are now only 12. When a bus comes in for repairs, the body work is done first so that the paint will dry while the mechanics are being checked. The object of the exercise is to get the bus back on the road before dawn. It is rugged work, but 93% of the buses are on the job every day. The technicians are good, and so is the organization. Their buses will be on the road for 16 hours a day, covering 450 square kilometers, and they will average 420 stops. Bombay also efficiently utilizes relics from colonial days. The famed Victoria Terminus, the finest example of tropical Gothic architecture in the world, is not just a monument to a bygone age. It has never been busier. It handles 900 trains a day, carrying some 2 million passengers. The past is also alive in parts of Bangkok. When the advisors to the Royal Court of Siam laid out their plans for their new capital city back in the 17th century, they designed it along the canals flowing out of the Keopai River. For those who live on the river and the canals of Bangkok, life goes on as it has for 3 centuries. Cheap and easy transportation. But these are just vestiges of the past. Bangkok began to lose its waterborne character in 1860, when King Mongkut converted an old elephant trail into a road suitable for wheeled traffic. Then came the Way of Kings, built by Rama V, who was driving a yellow electric car in 1908. And so the city has moved away from the waterways. They are now obstacles to be crossed by ferry boat en route to the new city. There are 8,000 tuk-tuks waiting for passengers. Some drivers own their own. Most work for large fleets. There are 15,000 drivers working around the clock. They were once pedal-driven, but were thrown off the streets when the authorities felt they were bad for Bangkok's image. But there was a desperate need for them, and they're back, now motorized and presumably more respectable. They are assembled locally, and the newer ones run on cheap compressed natural gas. They are perfectly appropriate vehicles for the winding back streets of Bangkok. In the heat, humidity, and monsoon rains of the city, no one can walk very far, and there's no room here for buses. On the very narrow streets, called sois, motorbikes available for a small fee wait to deliver passengers to their homes or their workplaces. Travel on Bangkok's little old streets is relatively cheap and efficient. The horrors of Bangkok begin and end on the so-called modern expressways. The king is no longer the only man with a car. In 30 years, the population has exploded from 2 million to 7 million. The automobiles of an ever-growing middle class are making it almost impossible for the poor to move. Over 60% of the people have to travel by public transport, but 94% of the traffic volume is taken up by cars and motorbikes. "3,000 privately owned minibuses are profitable and efficient. It is the city-owned bus system that is the heart of the problem." The World Bank study recently confirmed what a lot of people already knew. Although heavily subsidized, the bus system is failing miserably at its job.
The public bus company is one company called Bangkok Metropolitan Mass Transit. It's the third largest bus company in the world after London and Paris, have 5,000 bus fleet. So it's very difficult under single command, one bus. It's uneconomical. So they recommend to franchise some of this bus to private sector and reduce the size of bus company. And then their fare and others should be improved, to have more cost recovery oriented. But we also emphasize a great deal role minibus here, like any city in the world. In Africa, Latin America, they play a very important role because they are private oriented, very efficient, they're small, they are making profit. Very strange. The number of cars itself is not very big, The car and motorcycle here is about 1 million. But by year 2000, it will be double.
The exclusive bus lane was introduced in 1980. Policing is difficult and the automobiles encroach, but travel time on some of the bus routes was reduced by almost 40%. Contraflow bus lanes, which run in the opposite direction to the other traffic, tend to be self-enforcing and have been more successful. Travel on these lanes runs 3 times faster than buses flowing in the same direction as the cars and the trucks. The possibility of a head-on collision has kept most of the automobiles off the bus routes. The industrialized nations offer to help, but they sometimes seem to be more interested in selling their own hardware than in providing transportation appropriate to the needs of the developing countries.
The supplier, particularly international supplier, put a lot of pressure on us, try to offer many solutions on their own mode. Would it be rail mass transit, bus, light rail, and other modes? And with the government backup called Aid for Trade, is tremendous pressure on this one. We experienced that recently on bus offer and rail mass transit offer. So under this situation, we have to very careful in appraising various transport mode.
The Bangkok transportation planners are considering recommendations that bus lanes be completely separated from other traffic and that exclusive overpasses be built for buses at major intersections. Acting on a World Bank recommendation, the Bangkok planners are looking for other alternatives in Brazil. Porto Alegre is a shining example of a city which took an existing facility, the bus, and dramatically improved its efficiency. Buses move in convoy, like a train, through 30 kilometers of exclusive busways, built down the center of existing streets and separated from other traffic. They are all clearly labeled A, B, C, and D, indicating their ultimate destination. The lanes are controlled by lights. They assemble in order for their trip through the corridor. Several bus companies, all privately owned, cooperate to make the system work. The bus stops are also clearly labeled so that passengers can assemble at the proper spot for immediate boarding. After they pass through the downtown core in convoy, they fan out to their separate destinations, regrouping later to reform their convoys back into the center of the city. São Paulo, the fastest growing city in the world, already has 15 million inhabitants. Their busways are being further refined. The convoy is giving way to separate, staggered express routes. When road construction is finished, they will be moved back to the center lane. Organized like skyscraper elevators, each will run without stops until it reaches the specific stretch of the corridor it is serving. It has been estimated that these trunk lanes could carry up to 80,000 passengers an hour, 7 times more than Bangkok's single lane can handle. These bus developments could have great significance for Bangkok. Another innovation in São Paulo may not. The World Bank does not give high priority to metro systems. They are enormously expensive to build and maintain, and once a route has been developed, it is fixed in location and cannot be adapted to shifting population patterns. São Paulo has run up a huge debt building and maintaining its subway system. But to São Paulo, it may be the only alternative to urban paralysis. Its population is expected to reach 25 million by the year 2000. Other cities with intolerable population problems, such as Calcutta and Shanghai, have decided on a metro system, despite the fact it will never pay for its capitalization and be a chronic financial burden. Several industrial nations are pressuring Bangkok to institute a rail transit system, but Bangkok is resisting.
Rail to me is the last century, the 19th century technology. We are now in motor car technology. So to invest in 19th century technology is very expensive. And there are nowhere in the world with rail mass transit without government subsidy. Our philosophy, we don't want to see transport industry to be subsidized by the government. So the rail mass transit is rather, carry a low priority here.
Expressways are also very expensive, but most of the cost is usually buried in general taxation figures and is largely unpublicized. Bangkok has opted for expressways, which will funnel even more private cars into the downtown area. They're considering instituting special licenses for automobiles in the downtown core, but they're worried about political backlash. The needs of industry and of the middle class continue to run contrary to the needs of the poor. Expressways slice through poor communities, cutting neighborhoods off from each other. There is a need for expanded port facilities. The people here are being squeezed out by the expressway on one side and the expanding port on the other.
We are now clearing the slum in the inner core, and they are moving toward the peripheral. of Bangkok. You know, decentralized away from Bangkok, there are 3 stages. First stage is from the inner core to the peripheral of Bangkok, and then away from the new economic zone, like the eastern seaboard and other areas of the country toward the seaboard planning. The Bangkok in the future, I would say after 1995, will be in the management and information center, like any metropolitan region of the world. You know, it should be a management, not a productive center. Bangkok will be geared towards much more tertiary sector, not manufacturing or other productive sector.
So now the families who lived in the port area have been relocated 30 kilometers away. They have essential services and basic housing. Some industry has moved out and more will come, but it's not always appropriate to the skills of these people. Many still work in the port area, 30 kilometers away. They want to visit relatives and go to their old markets. If the plan to make bus routes profitable comes to pass, the flat rate fare may be gone, and the price of a ticket may depend on the distance. Then those who can least afford it, the poor on the outskirts of town, will be paying the highest rates of all. This is not to say that life on the outskirts of a third world city need necessarily be miserable. The outskirts of Trivandrum on the southwest corner of India sit on the edge of the Arabian Sea. The fishermen who live here are close to their work and their customers. The daily auction is as much a cultural as an economic exchange. The surplus fish will be cycled 10 kilometers to the central markets of Trivandrum. Although 600,000 people live here, life remains on a human scale. But Trivandrum is not just a primitive backwater. It's an institutional city with its universities, and it's a seat of government for Kerala state. It is a city that works, a city that does not go in for unnecessary frills. Even the Maharaja is one of the people. He is not inclined to unnecessary pomp. His palace and his Mercedes could use a coat of paint. He is traveling to worship at the ancient temple. He is traveling through streets developed through the centuries by the Indian, the Portuguese, the British, and the Indian again. Some of the modes of transport have also moved through the centuries, and those that still make sense survive. The bullock doesn't cost much to feed and can pull as much as a small truck. He moves slowly, but there's still room for him amidst the amazing variety of local traffic. Any problems are relatively minor. It is a rich mix of appropriate transport. Where there is conflict, there is legislation. Cars and trucks don't mix well in crowded market areas, and here the trucks have priority. The transportation planners of Trivandrum reorganize only that which does not work.
We should go in depth in planning the road network for this area. The poor living in this area...
Unlike some bureaucrats elsewhere, their emphasis is on the services for the urban poor.
80% of the people living in our cities in developing countries are poor. They perform in trips by low-cost transport modes such as walk, cycle, bus, and paratransit modes of transport.
There are 10 times as many auto rickshaws in Trivandrum as buses. They fill a need and make economic sense. They are operated by the poor, for the poor. The operators can keep the fares low and still make a decent income. They are cheap to operate and can be bought with a 25% down payment. Some owners drive their own, some rent them out. They need a lot of repair work and upkeep, which is another source of income for the semi-skilled worker and the small entrepreneur. Every aspect of Trivandrum's transportation system is under continual study by the transportation planners. Researchers compile exhaustive statistics on every aspect of travel. These are not just meaningless make-work collections of numbers. The surveys are aimed at an intelligent assessment of the social and economic ramifications of the city's transportation structure.
Is it possible to achieve it? If so, how we could achieve it? Will the public accept it?
This is a preliminary meeting with government to inform them of the findings of the surveys. The final report is still 6 months away. Research is just research unless it is disseminated to influence decision makers.
The specialty.
You have to have the resources and the political will to implement certain.
Surveys are continually conducted in the squatter settlements. Chungachila, a slum area in the center of the city. Their homes are old and worn out. They have no money to repair or replace them. The researchers ask how many work, and where, and at what. They ask where the children go to school, and whether the adults travel by foot, cycle, or bus. Their surveys will dictate transportation patterns. Statistics can be boring, especially for kids. Like children everywhere, their ideas of proper transport are sometimes a little expensive. The reality is that they are in the center of a bustling city and they're not much interested in moving out. Conventional planners often have other ideas.
Poor living in the city center are normally shifted out of the central portion so that the central part of the city can be beautified. Whereas in Trivandrum, they have been rehabilitated in the center of the city itself. Thereby, the problem of commuting for employment, education, and health and other facilities has been solved to a great extent. They have these facilities very close to their residence.
The government has decided to leave these people where they are. They're building new housing, replacing the community's worn-out homes, but keeping the poor in the center of the city. They're within walking distance of their work, their schools, and their social services. And so the people who can least afford transport have the shortest distance to go. Trivandrum has its own special characteristics, but some of the positive planning here could be used by other third world cities. All cities are not the same. Each has its own particular problems and solutions, but some concepts have a universal application. The concept that the use of human energy is demeaning has sometimes subverted the real needs of the people. The bicycle lives on because it uses 4 times less energy than a horse, 5 times less than a man walking, or an automobile. It uses man's most powerful muscle, the thigh. It costs little, it's easy to repair. Like the simple oarlock, it is a model of efficiency. With the increasing flow of people to their cities, affordable means must be found to supply urban mobility to the poor of the developing world.